You didn't wake up one day and decide to doubt. It started quietly, a question you couldn't answer, a feeling you couldn't ignore. And suddenly, something inside you whispered, "What if this isn't true?" But here's the part nobody warns you about. The moment you question it, it doesn't feel like curiosity. It feels like betrayal, not just of belief, but of people, of identity, of something sacred. And that feeling, it's not an accident. The invisible contract. No one hands you a contract when you grow up religious, yet somehow you still learn exactly what is expected of you. It happens quietly, through repetition, through tone, through the way certain questions are welcomed and others are gently shut down. You absorb it without noticing. Belief is not just something you hold in your mind. It becomes something you carry in your behavior, in your relationships, in the way you measure yourself. Because you do not just believe, you belong. And belonging always comes with conditions, even when no one says them out loud. Stay within the lines. Trust what you are taught. Do not wander too far into uncomfortable territory. Not because people are trying to control you in an obvious way, but because the system itself is built on stability, and questions can feel like instability. Over time, faith stops being treated like an idea that can be examined and starts being treated like loyalty that must be protected. That shift changes everything. It means that when doubt shows up, your mind does not treat it as curiosity. It treats it as risk, not intellectual risk, but relational risk. So a simple question starts to feel heavier than it should. You are not just asking if something is true. It feels like you are stepping outside an invisible boundary. And your body reacts before your logic has time to catch up. There is tension, a small sense of guilt, almost like you crossed a line you were not supposed to cross. What makes this even stranger is that no one explicitly taught you to feel this way. You were not given a rulebook that says questioning equals disloyalty. Yet the reaction is there, immediate and automatic. That is because it was built slowly, layer by layer, through years of association. Belief became tied to trust, trust became tied to belonging, and belonging became tied to safety. So, when you begin to question, your mind does not see a search for truth, it sees a threat to connection. When love gets tied to belief, this is where it stops being simple and starts becoming personal. For many people, religion is not just about God or ideas or doctrines. It is woven into the fabric of their relationships. It lives in childhood memories, in traditions repeated every year, in quiet moments that felt safe and familiar. You remember voices, not just teachings. A grandmother speaking softly about faith. Parents who seemed certain, calm, grounded. A community that felt like home, where people knew your name and your place. None of that feels abstract. It feels warm. It feels human. So, when you begin to question the belief itself, something unexpected happens. It does not feel like you are examining an idea. It feels like you are pulling on a thread, connected to people you care about. Almost like questioning the belief is somehow questioning them. And that creates a very quiet but powerful fear. If I no longer believe what they believe, where does that leave me? Not just intellectually, but socially, emotionally. Will I still fit into the same space? Will I still be seen the same way? From a purely logical perspective, this fear can seem exaggerated. People can disagree and still stay connected. That is true in theory. But emotionally, the situation feels very different. Because human beings are not built to prioritize truth above everything else, they are built to prioritize connection. Belonging comes first. It always has. Long before debates about belief, survival depended on staying within the group. So your mind treats the possibility of disconnection as something serious, almost like a threat. You can handle being wrong about an idea. That does not break you. But the idea of losing connection, of stepping outside the circle, that feels much heavier. And even if no one has said you would be rejected, the possibility alone is enough. It lingers in the background, shaping how far you are willing to go with your questions. The guilt that doesn't make sense. Have you ever noticed how selective this feeling is? You can question politics, challenge scientific ideas, even rethink major life decisions, and it feels completely normal. Sometimes it even feels productive, like you are growing. But the moment religion enters the picture, something shifts inside you. The reaction is immediate. A subtle tension appears, a quiet sense of guilt that does not quite match what you actually did. You did not harm anyone. You did not act irresponsibly. You simply asked a question. Yet it feels like you crossed into forbidden territory, like you brought something dirty into a place that was meant to stay untouched. That reaction has a source. In many belief systems, doubt is not treated as a neutral step in learning. It is framed as something risky, something that can lead you away from truth, away from safety, sometimes even away from salvation. In some cases, it is labeled as sin, which carries a moral weight far beyond simple curiosity. So instead of approaching a question with openness, your mind shifts into a defensive position. It stops asking whether the question is valid and starts asking what the question says about you. A normal moment of curiosity turns into self-evaluation. Am I weak? Am I losing something important? Am I becoming the kind of person I was warned about? That shift changes the entire experience. You are no longer exploring an idea. You are monitoring yourself while trying to think at the same time. It is like trying to solve a puzzle while someone is constantly watching over your shoulder, ready to judge every move. No wonder it feels exhausting. You are not just thinking. You are pushing against a built-in resistance that turns your own mind into an obstacle. It can feel like arguing with a part of yourself that refuses to listen, no matter how reasonable the question is. The identity trap. Let's be honest for a moment. Religion does not only shape what you believe, it quietly shapes how you see yourself. Over time, it becomes part of your identity, something you carry without thinking about it. You do not just hold beliefs. You start to describe yourself through them. I am a believer. I am faithful. I am part of this. That sounds simple on the surface, but it has deeper consequences. Because once belief becomes identity, questioning it is no longer just an intellectual exercise. It becomes personal. It feels like you are turning the question inward, as if you are asking something about who you are, not just what is true. So when doubt appears, it does not stay contained in the realm of ideas. It spreads. It touches everything connected to that identity. Your sense of stability, your place in the world, even the way you interpret your past. That is why the reaction can feel so intense, even if the question itself is small. It is similar to pulling a single thread from a piece of clothing. At first, it looks harmless. But as you pull, more starts to come loose. Patterns shift. The structure changes. And suddenly, what felt solid begins to feel uncertain. At that point, your mind reacts quickly. It tries to stop the process before it goes too far. There is an internal signal that says, "This is getting dangerous. Step back. Do not continue." Not because the question is wrong, but because the consequences feel unpredictable. This is not weakness. It is a form of protection. Your mind is trying to preserve coherence, to keep your internal world from fragmenting too quickly. Stability matters, even if that stability is built on ideas you have not fully examined. So the resistance you feel is not random. It is your mind trying to maintain order in the face of something that could change more than just what you believe. The fear of consequences. Some fears are loud and easy to identify. Others stay in the background, quiet but persistent, shaping how you think without asking for attention. This is one of those fears. It shows up in a simple question that feels heavier than it should. What if they are right and I am wrong? This is not just about being mistaken in a discussion or holding the wrong opinion. It reaches further than that. It touches something deeper, something existential. Ideas about heaven, hell, judgment, meaning. Even if you have started to question them, even if part of you no longer accepts them fully, they do not disappear overnight. They stay, not always in clear form, but as a feeling, a tension, a small voice that asks whether it is safe to go further. You might not consciously believe in the consequences anymore, yet your mind still reacts as if they could be real. That is how deeply these ideas can settle. It is similar to an old alarm system that keeps triggering long after the danger is gone. You know, logically, that nothing is wrong. But the sound still creates a reaction in your body. Your heart rate shifts. Your attention sharpens. You feel it, even if you cannot justify it. So questioning stops feeling like curiosity. It starts to feel like risk. Not a mild kind of risk, but something with unclear and possibly serious consequences. And the brain is not designed to casually accept that kind of uncertainty. It prefers something more stable, even if that stability comes with discomfort. Certainty, even imperfect certainty, offers predictability. You know where you stand, you know the rules, you know what to expect. Uncertainty removes that structure. It opens possibilities, but it also removes guarantees, and for the mind, that trade is not always easy to accept. The silence around doubt? Here is something people rarely say out loud. Doubt is far more common than it appears. It exists quietly in the background of many minds, even among those who seem the most certain on the surface. Yet, despite how widespread it is, almost no one speaks about it openly. That creates a strange illusion. When you have doubts, it feels like you are the only one experiencing them. You look around and see confidence, clarity, conviction, no hesitation, no uncertainty. So you assume the difference must be you. Because of that, doubt becomes something private, something you keep to yourself. It is not discussed at the dinner table. It is not casually shared in conversation. It stays internal, where it slowly starts to feel heavier than it actually is. Over time, it can even begin to feel inappropriate, as if you are holding something you should not have. Not because anyone directly told you that, but because the absence of open discussion makes it seem unacceptable. Silence has a way of creating its own rules. But the reality is very different from what it feels like. If you could hear what others are thinking, without filters, without social expectations, you would notice something unexpected. The same questions appear again and again, the same uncertainties, the same quiet moments of hesitation. The difference is not that others do not doubt. The difference is that most people do not reveal it. Everyone is managing their own internal process, while presenting a stable version of themselves to the outside world. That gap between inner experience and outer expression creates the illusion of isolation. It makes something common feel rare. It makes something human feel personal. And once you recognize that, the weight of doubt begins to shift. Not because the questions disappear, but because they no longer feel like something you are carrying alone. The system that protects itself. Now comes a part that can feel uncomfortable to look at directly. Belief systems are not only about passing down ideas or values, they also develop ways to preserve themselves over time. This does not always happen through force or clear rules. Often, it happens through perception. The key mechanism is subtle. It shapes how you interpret doubt before you even have the chance to explore it. If doubt is associated with weakness, then you instinctively move away from it. No one wants to feel weak, so the mind avoids that direction without much resistance. If questioning is associated with rebellion, it carries a different kind of weight. It no longer feels like curiosity. It starts to feel like defiance. And most people are not trying to rebel. They are trying to stay aligned, to stay connected, to stay within what feels acceptable. Then, there is the idea of leaving. If that is framed as loss, not just of belief, but of meaning, community, or stability, the cost becomes much higher. It is no longer about changing your mind. It is about potentially losing something valuable. And when the perceived cost rises, hesitation naturally follows. When you step back and look at this pattern, it becomes clear how effective it is. There is no need for constant enforcement. The structure maintains itself by shaping how you feel about stepping outside of it. Your own reactions become part of the system's stability. This does not automatically make it harmful or malicious. Many systems develop protective layers simply because they need continuity to survive. But it does make them powerful. And once you notice how these patterns work, it becomes difficult to ignore them. The process that once felt invisible starts to stand out, and the way you relate to your own thoughts begins to change. What betrayal really means. So now the question becomes unavoidable. Is questioning actually betrayal, or does it only feel that way because of everything that has been layered around it? The word betrayal carries weight. It implies disloyalty, a breaking of trust, a turning away from something you were supposed to protect. That is why the feeling hits so strongly. It does not feel like a simple shift in thinking. It feels like you are crossing a moral line. But pause for a moment and look at what is really happening. You are not deceiving anyone. You are not acting with the intention to harm. You are not abandoning values out of carelessness. You are asking questions because something inside you no longer aligns the way it used to. So, what if this is not disloyalty? What if it is honesty? That distinction matters more than it seems. Disloyalty is about breaking trust with others. Honesty is about not breaking trust with yourself. And those two are not always in perfect harmony. Sometimes staying loyal externally requires ignoring something internally. That is where the tension begins. You feel pulled in two directions at once. One side is asking you to stay consistent with what you have always been part of. The other side is asking you to stay consistent with what you are starting to see more clearly. Neither side feels easy. One carries the risk of losing connection. The other carries the risk of losing integrity. And your mind is trying to navigate both at the same time. So, the feeling of betrayal may not be a sign that you are doing something wrong. It may simply be the emotional cost of standing between two different definitions of truth. The quiet shift. At some point, often without a dramatic moment, something begins to change. It is not loud, it is not announced, but you notice a subtle shift in the way you approach your own thoughts. You stop asking whether a question is allowed, and you start asking whether it is true. That sounds small, almost insignificant, just a change in wording, but the impact is much deeper than it appears, because now the reference point has moved. You are no longer measuring your thinking against external permission. You are measuring it against internal clarity. And that changes the direction completely. Before, the goal was to stay within safe boundaries, to avoid crossing lines that might lead to discomfort or conflict. Now, the goal becomes understanding, even if that understanding leads somewhere unfamiliar. Fear still exists, but it is no longer in control of the process. This does not make things easier. In fact, it often makes them more complicated. There are moments of uncertainty where nothing feels fully stable. You may feel alone in ways you did not expect. You may question not just beliefs, but the framework that once made everything feel organized. It can feel like trying to put something together without clear instructions, missing pieces, unsure whether what you are building will even hold. There is frustration in that. There is confusion. But there is also something else, something quieter. A sense that what you are engaging with is real. Not inherited, not assumed, not protected from examination, just real. And that kind of engagement creates a different form of peace. Not the peace that comes from certainty, but the kind that comes from knowing you are no longer avoiding what is true. That feeling of betrayal does not mean you have done something wrong. It means you have stepped outside something that once gave you structure, meaning, and a sense of certainty. Of course it feels heavy. You are not just adjusting an opinion. You are reshaping how you relate to truth itself. And that process is rarely comfortable. It can feel like you are walking without the support you once relied on. There are moments where the ground feels uncertain, where answers are not immediate, where clarity takes time. But here is what often goes unspoken. Questioning does not weaken truth. It tests it. It strips away what cannot hold and leaves behind what can. Not quickly, not neatly, but honestly. So maybe this feeling is not a sign of loss. Maybe it is a sign of movement. Not away from something meaningful, but towards something more grounded. And that path, even if difficult, leads somewhere real.